On Tuesday the 18th of November 2025, Denmark will head to the polls for the local elections. Over the next couple of minutes or so, I'll tell you everything that one needs to know in order to cast a vote, which is quite simple. However, the rest of the video will be about how your vote is then translated into the final results, and the surprising and fascinating complexity of the system underlying local democracy in Denmark. In order to vote, you have to be over 18 and a citizen of Denmark, the EU, Norway, Iceland, or the UK, or have lived in Denmark for more than 4 years. By now, you should have already received your vote card, which will tell you the polling station that you need to go to and when. In Copenhagen, they'll be open from 8 AM to 8 PM on election day, which again is Tuesday the 18th of November. If you have not received it yet, contact your municipality, but you should be able to vote with any ID that has your CPR number on it. You'll be provided with 2 ballots, one for the municipal election and one for the regional election. You'll cast 1 vote for each. For example, if you live in Copenhagen, you'll be voting for both the Copenhagen City Council and the newly formed region of East Denmark. This is an example of a ballot from the parliamentary elections in 2021, and it demonstrates an important choice that you'll have to make. As you can see, there's a box next to the name of the party, and then underneath a list of candidates from that party, each with their own box. You'll be placing only one X on the ballot, and that vote can either be for the party as a whole or for a single candidate called a personal vote. So it's important to understand what those 2 different options mean. If you vote for the party, you're increasing the chances that your chosen party will win more seats. If you vote for a candidate, the same is true, you are increasing the chances that their party will win more seats, but you're also increasing the chances that your chosen candidate will be granted one of those seats ahead of the other candidates from their party. In either case, both options of personal and party votes have exactly equal power on determining the number of seats won by each party. The votes will be translated into seats using a semi-proportional representation system called de Hond, so there's a very low chance that voting for a party you like will help a party that you are strongly opposed to, though you may also be helping the other parties that your party has entered into an electoral alliance with. For example, in the Copenhagen municipal elections, these are the 4 electoral alliances for this election, and there are also other parties standing without any alliance. Remember to make only 1 mark on the ballot, make it an X, and use the pen provided. And congratulations, now you know how to vote, and all you have to do is decide who to vote for. But I'm not going to tell you really anything about who to vote for. In fact, I'm not even going to go into what you're voting on, because you can find better information elsewhere to inform that choice. What I'm going to talk about is what happens to the votes after you cast them, how the system can give some surprising results, and generally I'm going to nerd out over the electoral maths of it all. So if we have already covered everything you want to know, thanks for listening and I hope you enjoyed voting. But for those of you who really want to know how it all works, stick around. Danish local elections use a pretty interesting system that is quite unusual outside of Scandinavia. I'm going to mostly focus on the Copenhagen city elections for all my examples, because that's where I live. But you can apply the same principles to any of the other 97 municipal or 5 regional elections in Denmark. Before we get into what makes Denmark a bit special, it's good to understand the de Hond system, and there aren't many good videos out there explaining just the de Hond system, so I'm going to cover that first. But if you're already familiar with it, you can skip to this timecode. The fundamental problem that any single vote electoral system has to tackle is how to turn the almost continuous numbers of vote shares into a discrete number of seats. The de Hond method, also known as the Jefferson method, is one very popular method to do that, and it's used extensively around the world. How it works is that it attempts to minimise the difference between the percentage of seats that a party gets and the percentage of vote share they have amongst the parties that won seats at all. It tends to exclude very small parties and favour larger parties as a result. If you're British like me, you might remember it being used for EU elections, and it's also used for some seats of the London Assembly. While there is a formal mathematical definition for de Hond, I think it's best to show it through illustration, and I actually have 2 different ways of illustrating it that I like to use. Let's say we have 5 parties competing for 20 seats. We plot the votes on a bar chart with the most popular party on the left, and the other parties sorted to the right. And let's describe everyone's votes as being divided by the number 1. As the party with the most votes, Party A wins the first seat. We then increase its divisor to 2, update its new vote count, and reorganise the graph. Now Party B is on the top, so we give them a seat and increase the divisor to 2. Eventually we'll get back around to Party A being back at the top of the list, and then their divisor increases to 3. We continue like this until all seats are filled. Another way to look at it is if we take the number of votes and then chart out a table with the divisors on the top, 2, 3, 4 and so on. Then we just divide the number of votes by the divisors at the top and pick the 20 largest numbers in this whole grid. Both of these illustrations achieve the same thing, but maybe one or the other of them more intuitively shows to you how this works. Some places that use d'Hondt put a minimum threshold of votes in order to win any seats at all, but this is not the case for local and regional elections in Denmark. There are a few thresholds that emerge out of the deeper mathematics of d'Hondt. If you get a vote share of 1 divided by the number of seats, then you are guaranteed a seat. If you get a number below 1 divided by twice the number of seats, it's basically impossible to win a seat. For vote shares between these two ranges, things will depend on how the votes fall, but you're in with a chance. For the 55 seats elected in the Copenhagen City Council, this equates to 1.89% to definitely win one seat, and about 0.91% to be totally out of the running. How things fall further up the table is really down to the distribution of votes between parties. If we plot the votes from the 2021 Copenhagen municipal elections and apply the simple d'Hondt system to it, we get these seat counts. But here are the actual seat counts awarded, with SF and Radikale Venstre getting 1 seat fewer, and Alternativet and Venstre winning 1 extra. So how did that happen? Well, this is where those electoral alliances or valgforbund come in. In 2021, these were the alliances, and as you can see, the 2 parties that gained 1 extra seat are in different alliances to the 2 parties that lost a seat. To see why, it's helpful to think of the votes being counted through a series of 3 electoral rounds. For the first 2 rounds, personal votes for individual candidates just count as party votes for that candidate's party. In the first round, all parties in an alliance are counted as one big super party. d'Hondt is applied, and seats are awarded to the alliances and any parties that still got enough votes on their own. In Copenhagen in 2021, one party, Nye Borgerlige, or New Right, did win a seat without being part of any alliance. Then, in a second round, within the alliances, d'Hondt is applied a second time, to share out the seats won by that alliance. That's how we arrive at the final share of seats that we showed earlier. I'm going to return to the topic of alliances later, but for now let's look at the final round, where personal votes apply. When deciding which specific candidates win a seat, votes cast just for the party no longer really matter. But it's not simple at this stage either. Parties can either register as sideordnet, which literally translates as parallel, but is also known as open list, or as party list, which is also known as closed list. For the open list parties, the candidates with the most personal votes win the seats allocated to the party. For the closed list parties, they have already decided a ranked list of priority for their candidates, so usually it's just the people at the top of that list who will be elected. If you were already thinking that this was a pedantic description, well, buckle up, because technically personal votes do still have some impact even with a party list. There's a threshold called the fordelingstallet, or distribution number, which is the total number of votes cast for that party, both party and personal votes, divided by the number of seats won by that party plus 1. If anyone on a party list gets more personal votes than that number, then they automatically win a seat, and then the party list comes into effect. But I can't actually find any recorded examples of that happening for someone who wasn't already going to win a seat. Maybe it does happen and nobody considers it newsworthy. In the 2025 Copenhagen elections, these are the parties using a closed list system. All of the other parties are using an open list system, so personal votes will have more influence on which candidates get elected. After the representatives have been elected, the 7 mayors of Copenhagen have to be selected, including the Lord Mayor, who's the overall leader of the city. Each mayor also leads a committee, so they're a little like cabinet members with portfolios. However, perhaps surprisingly given all the mechanisms just discussed, it's not a process of direct election. The newly elected council basically agree these positions amongst themselves. Because the council is composed of many parties, this often means that mayorships will be split between different parties, in return for supporting one party on their selection for Lord Mayor. As you can see, because the vote was so split last time, although Enhedslisten got the most seats, they didn't get the Lord Mayor position, and instead got 2 of the other mayor positions. The other mayors are split between 4 different parties. This reflects the deal that the Social Democrats had to hammer out in order to hold on to the Lord Mayoralty. But this also reflects the fact that council is quite a collaborative place where consensus is necessarily built between the different parties. Polling suggests that Enhedslisten will again get the large number of seats, but for the first time that Social Democrats might not have enough support to gain the Lord Mayoralty. What this likely means is that if the left-wing parties are in the majority, that Enhedslisten under the current Technology and Environment Mayor Nina Barford will gain the Lord Mayoralty. But if they fall short, one of the other left-wing parties might be able to clinch it by gaining the support from across the political spectrum, as they are perhaps viewed as more moderate. This would most likely be SF under the current Health and Care Mayor Cisa Marie Welling, because polling suggests that they'll be the second largest left-wing party and they are a little bit more moderate than Enhedslisten. For the rest of this video, I'm going to loop back to that question of electoral alliances. I want to explore whether 2021 could have gone differently for the two parties that lost seats due to alliances, what that tells us about how alliances function, and what the alliances in Copenhagen in 2025 could lead to. The alliances in Copenhagen are quite different for the 2025 election. This is very Copenhagen specific because the parties have different sets of alliance in other municipalities and even in the regional elections for the same area. But if you don't live in Copenhagen or you're looking at regional elections, maybe you will see similar patterns in the alliances for your elections. The bloc containing the right-wing parties has been joined by New Borgerlige, who previously ran and won one seat without any alliance, and by the new party Danmarksdemokraterne, or Denmark Democrats. The more centrist bloc of the Social Democrats and Radikale Venstre by the newly formed Moderaterne party. These are both quite small changes, but the left-wing parties have significantly reorganised. Previously, Alternativet won a seat by pooling votes from three other minor Green parties that are not standing again in Copenhagen. Enhedslisten, who got the most votes in the whole 2021 election, were last time in alliance with SF and a fairly diverse list of minor and perennial candidates. All three of these parties have formed a bloc together with another new party called Demokraterne, the Democrats. This perhaps reflects a concerted push to try and win the Lord Mayor position, which has been held by the Social Democrats since the position was founded in 1938, or if you go back even further, they've chaired the council since 1913. The parties obviously hope that they will achieve this aim by clubbing together. However, perhaps the most interesting bloc from the perspective of understanding the system is the remaining minor parties. This includes two new parties that are worth mentioning, Skamløse Demokrater, or Shameless Democrats, and Frie Grønne, or Independent Greens. Both parties are campaigning around a leader who was formerly part of Alternativet. Both have also run highly visible campaigns, and if you've followed the Copenhagen election at all, you might already have some opinions about their campaigns. But from everything we've discussed, it's easy to see how even if they only got a few thousand votes and a very small percentage, the alliance system could give one or both parties a seat on the council. Remember what I said earlier. In order to be in with a chance of a seat in Copenhagen, your alliance only needs to get above 0.91% of the vote, and at 1.82% of the vote, you're guaranteed a seat. The parties in this coalition who did stand candidates at the last election collectively got 0.7% of the vote, and 1.34% went to other minor parties who are not standing again and were either not in any alliance or were in the minor party alliance of 2021. That's over 2.5% going to fringe parties. So even if none of those individual parties get anywhere near enough votes for a seat on their own, it's very possible that this alliance provides a path to a seat for one or both of the Skamløse Demokrater or the Frie Grønne. The motivation behind the alliances in the system is that they reduce the number of wasted votes. A vote can be considered wasted if the election outcome would have been the same even if those votes didn't exist. In a straightforward D'Hondt election, that's both the votes that are cast for the parties that win no seats and the surplus of votes that an individual party could have lost without changing their seat count. By joining an alliance, the parties within it are pooling these potentially wasted votes and seeing if they can scrape together enough to win an extra seat or two. Then each party is hoping for that second round election within the alliance that the extra seats will fall to their party. Obviously, the alliance strategy worked well for the parties that won extra seats in 2021. But what about those who lost a seat? Did they join the wrong alliance, and were they wrong to join an alliance at all? First, let's look at SF. We can see that if they joined the alliance with the Green parties, they wouldn't have lost a seat at all. In a purely party political sense, that's a bit of a win. In the more unlikely scenarios that they'd joined the centrist alliance, they still would have lost a seat, but instead Radikale Venstre would not have lost a seat. And finally, if they'd stayed out of the alliances or joined the alliance of the two very small minor parties, there would have been no change on the final result. For the other party that lost a seat due to alliances, Radikale Venstre, they too would have seen no change if they had got it alone. But interestingly, they would have actually avoided losing a seat if they'd allied with the two very small minor parties, and the impact would have instead fallen on the Social Democrats. That's only a difference of 566 votes, but it goes to show just how small differences can make seats change hands. The same would be true if they'd gone with the left-wing bloc. If they had joined the right-wing bloc, then they wouldn't have lost the seat and Venstre wouldn't have gained it. Most interestingly, if they had joined the Green bloc, they would have actually had 2 more seats than their real outcome, and it would be Social Democrats losing a seat and Alternativo wouldn't be gaining an extra one. So we could say that the main impact of Radicale Venstre's strategy last time was to support the Social Democrats into a seat that they otherwise wouldn't have won. Of course, not all of these scenarios are realistic, because some of those alliances wouldn't have welcomed those parties or vice versa. But what I hope this illustrates is how the mathematics of the alliances does have quite an influence on the delicate balance of seat allocations, and even a few hundred votes from a minor party can have a meaningful impact on the outcome. I think the important thing to remember when casting a vote is that you are actually increasing the chances of every member of that alliance winning more seats. So while you should vote for a party that you support, you might not want to vote for a party in an alliance with another party that you definitely don't want to help out. Usually that's not too much of an issue because the alliances are formed from like-minded parties, but it's worth bearing in mind. Note that where I've used terms like the Left Alliance and the Right Alliance, those aren't actually official terms, they're just terms I've used for clarity in this video, though I think that they are a fair characterisation of the parties within those blocks. It's also important to remember you can't control other people's votes for alliances you oppose. In UK and US elections, there's a lot of tactical voting where people will strategically vote for their second or third preference of party, purely to prevent a party they don't like from getting into power. That's not really something you have to worry about in this system, because while in hindsight you might be able to see how the alliance strategy won an extra seat here or there, it's not something that you as a voter can strategize around. As I said in the very first section, a vote for a party increases the chance of them getting more seats, and that's probably what should most guide your vote. This concludes our deep dive into the electoral system used for elections in Denmark. A totally different system is used for national elections, and I may cover that next year when the election occurs, even though as a British citizen I'm not able to vote. For full transparency, if you're curious about my biases, I will be voting for an SF candidate from my local neighbourhood, Tobias Zimling, and casting a party vote for SF in the regional elections. If you watched to this point, I doubt you need any more encouragement to find out about your local candidates, but I hope I've helped you better understand how your votes will impact the final result. Until next time, thanks for listening.